The tribunal ring of the Galactic Council did not orbit the gas giant so much as it hung suspended in the planet's gravity well like a diamond choker on a bloated throat. It was a masterpiece of intimidation architecture, a perfect circle of marble black alloy 3 miles wide, gleaming with the self-satisfied luster of a civilization that had forgotten the meaning of mercy. Outside the glass steel viewports, the storms of the gas giant churned in endless bruising purples and sickly ochres, a violent backdrop for the sterile cruelty unfolding within the central chamber. 3 women knelt on the center of the justice dais. They were human, they were generals, and they were currently the most hated living creatures in the civilized galaxy. General Amina Reyes, General Harper Sloan, and General Yelena Volkov were encased in restraint halos, shimmering fields of hard light that forced their bodies into rigid kneeling postures while leaving their heads exposed for the cameras. Their uniforms, once the pristine slate gray of the Terran Coalition High Command, were shredded ribbons of synthetic fabric, stained with sweat and the distinct copper-smelling fluid of arterial blood. High-speaker Xylos stood above them on a floating podium. He was a creature of tall, willowy grace, his skin the color of polished obsidian, draped in robes that shifted hue with his mood. Currently, they were a deep, judgmental crimson. Behold the architects of the Outer Rim massacre. Xylos's voice boomed, amplified not just by speakers but by neural resonance dampeners that made his words vibrate in the marrow of every spectator in the amphitheater. These are not soldiers. Soldiers fight for flags. These are monsters who fight for the sheer kinetic joy of extinction. The crowd roared. It was a sound like a tidal wave crashing against a cliff, a mixture of thousands of alien vocalizations merging into a singular frequency of hate. Above the kneeling women, massive holographic projections, the truth mirrors, floated in the air.
What did he say? He's so low.
These were not simple screens. They were biological interfaces linked directly to the nervous systems of the prisoners.
What do they say?
They broadcasted the physiological truth of the generals in real time. The crowd could see the erratic spike of General Sloan's heart rate. They could see the chemical flood of adrenaline in General Volkov's bloodstream. They could consume the pain of the accused as if it were a delicacy. Sarah Vera stood in the diplomatic box, separated from the mob by a shield of energy and a lifetime of rigid discipline.
Yeah, you're mean.
She was tall, even for her species, with features that possessed the sharp, devastating symmetry of sculpted starlight. Her skin had a faint, iridescent sheen, and her eyes were large, dark pools that reflected everything and revealed nothing. She stood with her hands clasped behind the small of her back, the picture of elegant neutrality. She was the envoy of the Veyron ascendancy, assigned to observe these proceedings to ensure legal protocols were met. That was the lie. The truth was burying itself under her fingernails, which were digging into her own palms hard enough to draw blood. She watched the truth mirrors. She saw the spike in neural activity that indicated severe distress. She had been trained in the finest academies of the core worlds to control every micro-expression, to slow her pulse at will, to become a statue of diplomatic grace. Yet, as the crowd bayed for blood, the corner of Sarah's left eye twitched. It was a microscopic failure of control, invisible to anyone but a master. But she felt it like a slap. The interrogator stepped forward. He was a squat, multi-limbed creature holding a device that looked deceptively like a conductor's baton. It was a memory comb. "This device does not invent pain," the high speaker announced, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that echoed across the vast chamber. "It merely excavates the truth. It pulls the hidden guilts from the dark water of the mind and forces the sinner to drown in them. Let us see what General Reyes hides in the dark." The interrogator thrust the tip of the baton into the halo surrounding Amina Reyes. The effect was instantaneous. on the massive truth mirror above Reyes. The abstract lines of biological data vanished, replaced by a jagged, chaotic stream of imagery. It was grainy and violent, pulled directly from the visual cortex of the woman. A burning city, the scream of a dropship engine, a soldier, barely 18, holding his own intestines in his hands, looking up at Reyes and begging for his mother. Reyes did not scream. Her jaw clamped shut with such force that a molar cracked, the sound audible even over the low hum of the gravity generators. Her eyes bloodshot and burning, fixed on a point in the middle distance, refusing to give the crowd the satisfaction of closing. "Confess!" the interrogator shrieked. "Admit you ordered the strike on the civilian transport." Reyes spat a glob of blood onto the pristine white floor of the dais.
This is what it is. Look at my stream.
Sarah Vera felt a wave of nausea roll through her. This was not justice. This was theater. She looked at the high speaker, noting the way his robes shimmered with a satisfied gold pulse. He was not looking at the prisoner.
You don't like cheese?
He was looking at the camera drones. Light years away, in a bunker buried 2 miles beneath the granite spine of the Rocky Mountains on Earth. The air was cold and smelled of recycled oxygen and ozone. The war room was silent. It was a silence so heavy it felt like atmospheric pressure.
Damn, okay. After this
200 men and women, the intelligence and strategic apex of the Terran coalition, stood frozen before the main tactical wall. Captain Mason Cade sat at a console near the back, his posture deceptively relaxed. He was a man composed of sharp angles and rough edges, with dark hair that defied regulation cuts and eyes the color of old flint. He was an intelligence officer by rank, but his file was a black redaction bar that simply read specialist, kinetic access. In the trade, they called him a lockbreaker. There was no door, no code, and no person he could not crack open given enough time and the right leverage. He watched the feed from the tribunal ring. He watched General Reyes's memory of the dying soldier broadcast to half the galaxy. He saw the way the alien crowd cheered at the sight of human grief. Mason's hands were still on the console, but his knuckles were white. Beside him, Admiral Holloway, a man whose face was a roadmap of scars from the Centaurian campaigns, leaned forward. The Admiral's voice was a low rumble, barely a whisper, yet it carried through the silent room like a shockwave. The Galactic Council tortured 3 human female generals, Holloway said. He paused, watching the screen as the interrogator ramped up the voltage on the memory comb. And humanity unleashed the Baba Yaga. Holloway finished. The phrase sucked the oxygen out of the room. Heads turned, eyes widened. Project Baba Yaga was not something discussed in open briefings. It was a ghost story. It was a rumor whispered in the mess halls of orbital stations and the darkened bars of shadow ports. It was the thing that supposedly slept in the dark between stars, waiting for the day when the rules of engagement were burned. Holloway turned to Mason, Captain Cade, front and center. Mason stood and walked to the central table. He felt the weight of 200 stares on his back. "You are leaving within the hour," Holloway said, his voice flat and hard. "Your objective is the tribunal ring. You will infiltrate the holding sector. You will extract Generals Reyes, Sloan, and Volkov, and you will do it while securing hard evidence that this entire trial is a piece of staged theater." "We have assets in place?" Mason asked. Holloway shook his head. "We have nothing. The Council has locked down the sector. If you are detected, there is no extraction for you. If you trigger an alarm in the cell block, the Council initiates the purity protocol." Mason nodded slowly. "They vaporize the prisoners to prevent contamination." "Correct. You have to break into the most secure facility in the known galaxy, steal 3 high-profile prisoners, and steal the data that proves their innocence. all without tripping a sensor net designed to catch a fruit fly. Mason looked at the screen again. General Sloan was now convulsing in the halo, her breath coming in ragged hitches. "If I fail?" Mason asked. Holloway gestured to a secondary screen. It showed a vault door deep within the Earth's crust. The metal was dull gray, marked with warnings in 12 languages. As they watched, a thermal indicator on the side of the vault began to climb. The metal was warming. "If you fail, or if those generals are executed," the Admiral said, "we open the box, we wake the witch, and God help us all." Mason looked at the vault. He knew the stories. They said Baba Yaga wasn't a ship. They said it was a woman who had died 1,000 years ago, uploaded into a chassis of war metal and hate, a machine that didn't just kill enemies but dismantled their civilizations. It was a weapon of last resort because once you turned it on, you couldn't tell it to stop. "I'll get them," Mason said. The insertion was a nightmare of physics and deception. Mason arrived not in a stealth ship, but inside a diplomatic courier vessel, buried in a cargo crate labeled as hydroponic filaments. He emerged in a safe house in the lower ring levels, a cramped room that smelled of sulfur and stale nutrient paste. He was checking the charge on his maglock picks when the door chimed. It wasn't the rhythmic chime of a security patrol. It was the specific, complex code of a diplomatic override. Mason drew his weapon, a kinetic rail pistol that fired silent, heavy slugs, and leveled it at the door. "Enter," he said. The door slid open. Sarah Vera stepped inside. In the dingy light of the safe house, she looked impossibly clean, her iridescent skin glowing softly. She wore the flowing, high-collared robes of a Varen envoy, but her eyes were scanning the room with the tactical precision of a sniper. She looked at the gun pointed at her chest. Then she looked at Mason's face. She did not raise her hands. "You are holding that weapon incorrectly if you intend to penetrate my kinetic shielding," she said. Her voice was cool, melodic, and utterly unimpressed. Mason didn't lower the gun. "And you are standing in a dead zone. Lady, who are you?" "I am Seraphine Vera. I am the reason you are not currently breathing vacuum. I scrubbed your biosignature from the docking sensors 3 minutes ago." Mason narrowed his eyes. "A Varen, the Council's golden children." "Why?" Mason asked. "Because I prefer my wars to be declared, not manufactured," she said. She stepped fully into the room, the door hissing shut behind her. "I am your liaison. I didn't order a liaison. The Council does not care what you ordered. You are a blunt instrument, Captain Cade. I am here to make sure you do not break the wrong things." Mason holstered the pistol, though he kept his hand near the grip. The movement was fluid, aggressive. He stepped into her personal space, testing her. She didn't flinch. She smelled of ozone and something floral, like night-blooming jasmine frozen in ice. "I don't need a babysitter," Mason said, "especially not one from the Varen ascendancy." "Or is it Varen Ash Kandar E?" He butchered the pronunciation deliberately, mangling the glottal stops of her native tongue. Sarah's expression didn't change, but the air around her seemed to drop 10 degrees. "It is pronounced Vera Ashkandare," she corrected, her enunciation precise and sharp enough to cut glass. "And if you butcher my language again, I will have security detain you for cultural vandalism. Humans. You weaponize sarcasm like it is a religion. It's the only thing you people can't jam with a frequency blocker," Mason retorted. He turned back to his gear, shoving a pack of decryptors into his vest. "Why are you really here, Sarah? You're risking treason just by talking to me." Sarah walked to the single viewport, looking out at the sprawling, neon-lit misery of the lower ring. "I have been tracking funds," she said softly. Credits moving through shell corporations. Votes in the council being cast by delegates who died months ago. Ghost votes. Mason stopped packing. Corruption? Orchestration, she corrected. Someone wants this war. The attack on the border, the arrest of your generals, the trial, it is a script. And I do not like being an actor in a play I did not write. She turned to face him. The mask of the diplomat slipped, just for a second. Mason saw something raw underneath. Fear. No. Anger. Cold. Pressurized anger. If you go in there alone, you will die, Sarah said. The council has internal security measures you cannot even conceive of. Purity protocols are the least of your worries. And if I take you with me? Mason asked. Sarah stepped closer. The distance between them closed to inches. He could see the intricate bioluminescent patterns tracing her jugular vein. I can get you through the diplomatic checkpoints, she said. I can give you the codes to the lift shafts. And in exchange? In exchange, you get me the data from the High Speaker's private server. The proof of the ghost votes. Mason laughed, a short, humorless bark. So I'm your burglar. We are both thieves today, Captain. I am stealing justice. You are stealing lives. He looked at her. He saw the calculation in her eyes, but also the resolve. They were two predators circling a carcass, neither sure if the other was competition or a mate. The mistrust in the room was palpable, heavy and electric. It felt dangerously like foreplay. Fine, Mason said. But if you blink when things get wet, I leave you behind. I was trained in the courts of silence, Captain, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a silken threat. I do not blink. On the justice dais, the show continued. General Harper Sloan was hyperventilating. The truth mirror above her showed her oxygen saturation dropping to critical levels. The crowd was roaring, a deafening wave of noise that vibrated the floor plates. Sloan closed her eyes. She wasn't panicking. She was counting. Inhale for 3, hold for 2, exhale for 4. It was a Morse code rhythm, played out on the instrument of her own lungs. She was broadcasting to the others. Hold. Line. Wait. Next to her. General Volkov was shaking. The interrogator had moved to her. Where are the encryption keys for Earth's orbital grid? The interrogator demanded, the baton hovering inches from her temple. Volkov looked up. Her face was a mask of bruises, one eye swollen shut. She smiled, revealing blood-stained teeth. I remember, she rasped. The crowd quieted. The High Speaker leaned forward on his podium. Tell us, the interrogator whispered. The code is, Volkov stammered, feigning a breakdown. It is 0, 0, go to hell, 7. She was deliberately misremembering the sequence for a standard latrine lock, stalling for time, forcing the interrogator to verify the nonsense numbers. Every second she wasted was a second the council looked incompetent. And then there was General Reyes. She had stopped looking at the middle distance. She had lifted her head. She was staring directly into the primary camera drone. Her gaze was terrifying. It traveled across light years of void, through the vacuum, down the gravity well, and into the screens of billions of viewers. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at Earth. She was daring them to look away. She was demanding that they witness this. Her heart rate on the truth mirror was steady, impossibly steady. It was the heartbeat of a woman who had already accepted she was dead and was simply waiting for the invoice to clear. The broadcast cut to the High Speaker. The prisoners remain defiant, Xylos announced, his voice filled with theatrical sorrow. Their souls are crusted with the filth of their crimes. Therefore, we must escalate. A timer appeared on the massive screens floating above the ring. 48 hours, the High Speaker declared. In 48 hours, we will initiate the final extraction session. We will peel the secrets from their minds, layer by layer, and once they are empty, they will be cleansed. The crowd erupted in approval. Back in the war room on Earth, the silence shattered. "Diplomacy is dead," shouted a minister from the European Alliance. "We need to strike now." "And trigger a massacre?" countered the representative from the Pacific States. "We don't have the fleet strength." Admiral Holloway ignored them all. He was looking at the secondary screen. The thermal indicator on the vault was rising. The metal was no longer just warm, it was hot. The ancient cryo-seals on the door labeled Project Baba Yaga were beginning to hiss, venting freezing vapor that swirled across the floor of the bunker like fog.
On the hill?
Inside the vault, deep within the dark, something mechanical began to hum. It was a low frequency beneath the range of human hearing, but it vibrated in the teeth of everyone in the bunker. It sounded like a heavy sleeper beginning to stir. Mason Cade's voice crackled over the secure link, distorted by light years of distance but clear in its intent. "I'm in," Mason said. "The clock is running." In the safe house, Mason checked the magazine of his pistol. Sarah Vera adjusted her robes, hiding a slim crystalline data spike in her sleeve. They stood at the door, side by side. They didn't touch. The air between them crackled with the static of two people who knew that in 48 hours,
Okay.
they would either be heroes,
I'll probably play one or two
corpses,
more with Destiny.
or the reason the galaxy burned. "Let's go see the wizard," Mason muttered.
Okay.
Sarah
Let
looked at
me
him,
see if she said
confused.
She sent me a...
"It's a human expression," he said, popping the seal on the door. "It means we're going to find the man behind the curtain." "And kill him?" Sarah asked. Mason grinned, and it was not a nice smile. "If he's lucky." He stepped out into the corridor, into the belly of the
Bonker,
beast.
did you send me a friend request on here?
Sarah followed, her shadow merging with his as they disappeared into the neon gloom of the tribunal ring. Far below them, the
Maybe
gas
that's how
giant
I don't
churned,
know.
indifferent to the small, fragile lives scurrying above its clouds. And far away, in the dark
Eddie
beneath a
Bonkers,
mountain,
93.
the Baba Yaga opened its first eye. Port Omen was a tumor of a station, clinging to the side of a massive asteroid in the trailing Lagrange point of the gas giant. It was the supply gut for the pristine tribunal ring floating above, a place where the garbage went out and the illicit vices came in. The air here tasted of recycled gin and ozone, and the lighting was a permanent headache-inducing strobe of neon pinks and sickly
What
greens.
am I doing?
Mason Cade stepped off the transport
I
shuttle,
didn't mean to invite...
his collar turned up against the grime.
Oopsie.
Beside him, Sarah Vera moved with a grace that was entirely out
Yeah,
of
you
place in this
Destiny.
hive of scum.
Guys, I want to eat this burger so bad.
She had
already.
draped a heavy cloak over her diplomatic robes, but the way she
Let me
walked,
take a bite.
like the floor was unworthy of her feet, drew eyes. "We need to blend in," Mason muttered, steering her away from a group of dock workers who were staring a little too intently. "You walk like you own the asteroid." "I am adjusting my gait to mimic the local lethargy," Sarah replied, her voice low. "It is difficult. Everyone here moves as if gravity is a personal insult." They were deep in the shadow port now, a labyrinth of pressurized tunnels where smugglers sold forged identities, stolen oxygen canisters, and dreams that would rot your teeth. This was the recruitment ground. Mason needed a team, and he needed them cheap, desperate, and crazy enough to break into the most secure facility in the sector. Their first stop was a dive bar called the Rusty Lung. The air inside was thick with smoke that curled in lazy, gravity-dampened spirals. On a small, grime-slicked stage in the corner, an alien was dying, metaphorically. He was a Valerian, a species known for their multiple vocal cords and skin that shifted color with emotion. Currently, he was a dull, depressed beige. So, The high speaker walks into a bar. The Valerian said into the microphone,
Bad.
his voice a harmonious chord of misery. And the bartender
She's an
says,
ass.
why the long face? And the high speaker
Game.
says, it is not a face. It is a receptacle for the
Can I
galaxy's
request you to
disappointment.
join? No.
The crowd booed. Someone threw a synth beer bottle. It shattered against the Valerian's shoulder. He didn't flinch. He just turned a darker shade of beige. That is Bax, Mason said, nodding at the sad creature. Best intrusion specialist in the sector. He hacked the Bank of Proxima just to pay off a heckler. He is terrible at comedy, Sarah observed, wincing as Bax launched into a joke about reproductive spore drifts. That is why he is desperate, Mason said. 10 minutes later, they had Bax cornered in a booth. The alien looked at the credits Mason slapped on the table. I don't do extraction, Bax said, his voice warbling. I am an artist. I am refining my Tight Five for the Apollo Comedy Festival. You are going to prison if you stay here, Mason said. And the acoustics in Solitary are terrible. Help us, and I wipe your criminal record. You can tour the core worlds. Bax's skin flashed a hopeful lavender. The core worlds. They appreciate satire there.
Are you
They
ready,
love it.
Destiny?
Mason lied. Next was the medic. They found Doc Aris in a back alley clinic that smelled of bleach and burnt meat. She was a human woman with hair the color of steel wool and hands that were steady as stone. She was stitching up a smuggler's knife wound without anesthesia while smoking a cigarillo. Mason Cade, she said without looking up. I heard you were dead. Rumors. Mason said, I need you. Doc, I'm retired. It's for Reyes. The needle in Doc Aris's hand stopped. She looked up. Her eyes were hard, surrounded by a web of wrinkles from too many years staring at triage screens. Reyes? She asked quietly. She's in the ring. They're breaking her. Doc Aris tied off the suture with a violent jerk, making the smuggler yelp.
Me, I guess.
She stubbed out her cigarillo. I'll get my kit. The final recruit was the hardest to find. They had to descend to the engineering levels, where the drone wrangler lived in a nest of copper wire and salvaged servos. His name was Kestrel. He was a waif of a boy, barely 20, who spoke to the swarm of micro-drones hovering around his head in a language of clicks and whistles.
Are you joining Destiny?
He doesn't like people, Mason warned Sarah as they approached. Don't look him in the eye. Look at the machines. Kestrel agreed to join only after Sarah let him scan the advanced empath lattice in her diplomatic brooch. He didn't ask for money. He just wanted to touch the tech. With the team assembled, the dynamic of the mission shifted. They moved through the port, gathering supplies. Sarah became the shield. In the chaotic customs checkpoints, she played the imperious diplomat, demanding clearance, distracting the guards with her terrifying beauty and sharp, bureaucratic insults. At a security gate, a guard demanded their ident chips. Sarah stepped forward, her robes shimmering. Do you know who I am? She asked, her voice projecting a royalty that made the guard stumble back. I am Envoy Vera, and if you delay my entourage, I will file a complaint that will have you scrubbing waste filters on a mining colony until the stars burn out. While the guard stammered an apology, mesmerized by the iridescent glow of her skin, Mason slipped past her. In the shadows of the corridor, their bodies brushed. It was a calculated collision. Sarah's hand, hidden in the folds of her robe, found Mason's. For a second, palm pressed against palm. Her skin was cool, smooth as polished stone. His was rough, calloused. She pressed a stolen security key into his grip. Her fingers lingered for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Mason looked at her. In the dim, flickering light of the tunnel, the diplomatic mask was gone. Her eyes were wide, dark, and searching. The air between them felt thin, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Mason's arm stand up. If he closed his hand, he would trap her fingers. If he leaned in, the distance would vanish. "Move," she breathed, the word barely a whisper. He pulled away, pocketing the key. The loss of contact felt like a physical drop in temperature. He moved into the darkness, his heart hammering a rhythm that had nothing to do with fear. The tension didn't dissipate, it fermented. They moved through the marketplace of Port Omen, a sprawling bazaar of the weird and the illegal. Here, physics was a suggestion. Gravity stalls allowed patrons to float while they ate,
Did you ready up?
and vendors sold scents that triggered specific memories. Sarah walked ahead, the crowd parting for
Hello,
her.
Foot. How are you?
Mason trailed, watching her back,
She's back.
watching the way the port's lights played off her hair.
How are you? How have you been?
He caught a smuggler eyeing her, a look of hungry assessment, and Mason felt a surge of possessive aggression so sharp it surprised him. He shifted his coat to reveal the handle of his rail pistol. The smuggler saw it and vanished into the crowd. Sarah glanced back. She had seen it. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips, followed by a look of warning. Focus.
That's like me
They reached
too.
a section of the market known as the Ink District.
Yeah.
Here, living tattoos were sold, parasitic organisms that bonded to skin and moved.
Wait, did you cut
Suddenly, a hand shot out from a dark stall, grabbing Mason's wrist. "The truth vendor," a voice hissed. "I smell it on you, human, the deception, it reeks." Mason spun, ripping his arm free. The vendor was a creature wrapped in rags, its face a cluster of sensory feelers. "You carry a lie," the creature shrieked, drawing attention.
I know, on Saturday.
"A grand lie, you are not who you say." Heads turned. Security drones overhead paused in their patrol. Mason froze. He couldn't shoot a civilian, not here.
Oh, was it?
Sarah was there in an instant. She didn't shout. She stepped between Mason and the creature, her presence like a wall of ice. "He is human," she
I think
said,
that was the last
her voice cutting through the noise. "Of course he carries lies. It is their native language."
How's Fortnite?
She grabbed Mason's arm, her grip iron hard, and dragged him away before the drones could scan them. She pulled him into a narrow alleyway that smelled of roasting spices and engine grease. "You are loud," she hissed, pinning him with a glare. "Even when you are silent, you scream your intentions. You must learn to dampen your projection." "I didn't do anything," Mason snapped, adrenaline spiking.
I was like,
"You
ew.
existed," Sarah countered. "That creature smells intent. You are walking around like a loaded weapon hoping someone pulls the trigger. You need to be..." She stopped. They were pressed together in the cramped alley. Mason's chest was heaving.
I love
Sarah's breathing was shallow.
I just
The anger in her eyes was melting into something else. Something terrified and hungry. "Be what?" Mason asked,
I worked at
his
GameStop
voice
too.
rough. "Numb," she whispered. "Like me." She pushed off the wall and walked away, leaving him standing in the spice-scented dark, his skin burning where she had touched him. They found the contact in a back room of a data broker's shop. The information cost them 3,000 credits and a favor to be named later. The data was damning. It was a series of encrypted invoices. "Look at this," Mason said, projecting the files onto a rusty table. Bax, the hacker, adjusted his visual receptors.
Fuck, that's all I was
He
trying to-
whistled,
fuck it.
a sound like a slide whistle dropping. "That is a lot of zeros," Bax said. The invoices linked the council's high speaker directly to the Ares Combine, a human weapons manufacturer. And below that, payments to the Terran First Media Network. "They are paying both sides," Mason said, the realization settling in his gut like cold lead. "The council pays the human extremists to incite violence. The extremists attack council borders. The council buys weapons to defend itself. The Ares Combine kicks back profits to the high speaker. It is a closed loop," Sarah said, staring at the numbers. It is not a war. It is a business model. And the generals? Doc Eris asked, her voice trembling with rage. Marketing expenses, Mason said grimly. High above them, on the tribunal ring, the marketing campaign was entering its next phase. The interrogation chamber had changed. The physical torture devices were gone, replaced by a single slender needle hovering at the base of General Reyes's skull. The future needle.
Right? I know.
It did not inflict pain. It hijacked the brain's predictive centers. It took the subject's deepest fears and extrapolated them into a hallucination so vivid, the mind could not distinguish it from reality. General Reyes screamed. In her mind, she was standing on the burning surface of Earth. She saw the orbital bombardment raining down fire. She saw the cities of Europe boiling into vapor. And a voice, her own voice, whispered that it was her fault. You failed. You were weak. You let them die. Beside her, General Sloan was weeping silently. The needle was in her neck now. She saw her children, not as they were, but as slaves in a council mine, their backs broken, looking at her with hatred. Sarah Vera stood in the observation booth. She had used her highest diplomatic override to get in here alone. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of the vitals monitors. She watched the generals break. She watched strong women reduced to sobbing wrecks by a needle of light. She activated the comms channel to the holding cell. General Sloan, she whispered. Sloan's head snapped up. Her eyes were wild, dilated with chemically induced horror. She saw Sarah behind the glass. You, Sloan rasped, the pretty alien doll. I can stop the feed for 2 minutes, Sarah said, her hand hovering over the control panel. I can give you silence.
On my way.
Sloan laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. She spat blood at the glass, separating them. You think that helps? Sloan sneered. You think turning down the volume washes the blood off your hands? You're not here to save us, girl. You're here to feel clean. You want to watch the monsters so you can tell yourself you aren't one of them. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Here to feel clean. She cut the feed. She backed away from the window, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at her hands. They were trembling.
I feel like people are gonna come up behind us.
Sarah found Mason in the lowest level of the safe house, checking the charge on the drone batteries. He was alone. She didn't announce herself. She just stood in the doorway, the darkness clinging to her robes. They are using the future needle, she said. Mason didn't look up. I know. I saw the energy spikes on the grid. They are showing them the end of their world. Mason. Mason stopped working. He set the battery down with a heavy clank. He turned to face her. Sarah looked shattered. The perfect diplomat was gone. Her hair was slightly askew, her eyes red-rimmed. I cannot do this, she whispered. Her voice broke, a fracture in the porcelain. I was trained to observe, to weigh geopolitical outcomes. I was not trained for this meat, this cruelty. I am afraid, Mason, I am afraid that if I stay here, I will become like them. I will become something that watches pain and calls it necessary. She was shaking.
Oh, he's running.
Mason crossed the room in 2 strides.
Did we finish him?
He didn't offer a handkerchief. He didn't offer a hug. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip hard, grounding her. Listen to me, he said, his voice a low growl. You don't get to be afraid. Not tonight. I am not a soldier, she pleaded. No, you're worse. You're a witness. And right now, that's what they need.
Oh, shit.
He shook her, just once, forcing her to look at him.
I need ammo, yeah.
Stop watching. Sarah,
All right, I need to back up.
start acting. You want to feel clean?
Hello.
Then you get your hands dirty. You help me burn this place to the ground.
Hello.
The intensity of his gaze was overwhelming. It hit her like gravity, pulling her center of mass toward him.
Thank you so much for
The
the
anger, The fear, the adrenaline, it all twisted into a sudden, sharp need. She stepped closer. The distance vanished. She could feel the heat radiating off him. She looked at his mouth. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted to bite him. She wanted to erase the images in her head with something real, something physical and violent and alive. Mason's eyes dropped to her lips. His breath hitched. They were inches apart. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and sweat. Sarah's hand came up, resting on his chest, over his heart. It was beating fast, a frantic drum. "If I touch you," she whispered, "I am betraying my people." Mason leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Your people are torturing mine," he murmured. "Maybe betrayal is the only honest thing left." She trembled. She wanted to close the gap, but the image of Sloane spitting blood flashed in her mind. "You're here to feel clean." She pulled back. It took every ounce of will she possessed. She stepped away, her chest heaving as if she had just surfaced from deep water. "Not yet," she said, her voice shaking. "Not until they are safe."
No, I didn't.
Mason stared at her, his eyes dark with unspent energy. He nodded, once. "Get your gear," he said, turning back to the table. "We leave in 1 hour." On Earth, the decision was made. The final deadline was approaching.
I don't know why it shows that.
The council had announced the final extraction session would begin ahead of schedule. In the war room, Admiral Holloway stood before the main screen. The president of the coalition was on the line, her face pale. "Authorize limited activation," the president said. "God forgive us." Holloway turned to the technician at the vault controls. "Open it," he ordered. "Deep in the mountain."
I am with that game, so.
The heavy locking bolts of the Baba Yaga vault retracted with thunderous booms. The massive door, 3 feet of lead and titanium, groaned open. Vapor poured out, rolling over the feet of the soldiers standing guard. Inside, the chamber was vast and lined with cooling pipes that frosted the air. In the center, suspended by magnetic fields, hung the chassis. It did not look like a ship. It looked like a coffin. It was sleek, black metal, etched with symbols that predated spaceflight. There were no windows, no thrusters visible, just a monolith of death. As the vault opened, the audio sensors picked up a sound. It was coming from the machine when it was a choir. Thousands of synthesized voices layered over one another, humming in perfect, terrifying harmony. They were singing "Rock-a-bye Baby" on the treetop. The song distorted, deepening into a bass rumble that shook the teeth of the observers. "When the wind blows, the cradle will rock." The lights on the chassis began to pulse, red, slow, rhythmic beats, like a heart waking up after 1,000 years of ice. Back in the safe house, the team was prepping for departure. Doc Aris was checking her med kit, loading hypo sprays with adrenaline and coagulants. Mason sat nearby, sharpening a combat knife. "You're shaking," Doc said, not looking up. "I'm not shaking," Mason lied. "You are." Doc snapped the kit shut. She looked at him. "You're scared you're going to enjoy it," she said. Mason stopped sharpening. He looked at the blade. "I'm scared I won't care," he admitted. "I'm scared that I'll get in there. See what they did to Reyes, and I'll stop being a rescuer. I'll just become an executioner. I don't want to be a monster." Doc Aris sighed. She walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "Vengeance is a fire, Mason," she said softly. "It warms you at first, but if you hold on to it too long, it eats the hand that holds it. You don't go in there to kill them. You go in there to save us." "That's the difference," Mason nodded, holstering the knife. "Save us." "Right." The team moved to the supply shuttle Mason had secured. It was a battered hauler, painted with the livery of a waste management firm. Sarah was waiting at the ramp. She had traded her diplomatic robes for a sleek, dark flight suit that she had seemingly pulled from thin air. She looked
Where are we
lethal.
going?
Bax, the comedian hacker, was already in the pilot's seat.
Okay.
I have renamed the ship, Bax announced over the comms. It is now the USS Punchline.
We can drop
Because we
right
are
in
about to
parking.
deliver it. Nobody laughed. Kestrel, the drone boy, was sitting in the back, his eyes rolled back in his head as he synced with the ship's sensors. We are clear for launch, Kestrel whispered, as the shuttle lifted off from Port Omen, detaching from the asteroid's gravity. Something strange happened on the dashboard. The nav computer flickered. Static washed over the screens. Then, for a split second, a signal cut through the noise. It wasn't Council encryption. It wasn't Terran code. It was a song.
Yeah.
Cradle will fall. Or Sarah
Wait, I
gasped.
should probably give
She
you
grabbed
some.
her head, her eyes widening. What is it? Mason asked, steadying her. I heard it, she whispered. Inside my head. Heard what?
Ignore
A
that.
voice.
Okay.
It tasted like iron and old sorrow. It recognized me. Mason. Recognized you? How? My empath lattice, she said, her face pale. It pinged me. It knows I am here, far away, in the dark between the stars. The Baba Yaga's systems adjusted. The massive weapon shifted its trajectory.
Wait, I was supposed to.
It had found a beacon. It had found a compatible mind. The USS Punchline fired its thrusters,
We need money.
shooting toward the black
Okay,
marble ring
our
of the
friend over
tribunal.
there.
Mason looked out the viewport. The tribunal ring loomed ahead, a dark halo against the gas giant. Here we go, he said. The shuttle dove into the shadow of the enemy, while behind them, the witch began to hunt. The docking clamp of the waste hauler USS Punchline engaged with a heavy industrial thud that reverberated through the hull. Outside the airlock, the tribunal ring awaited. Mason Cade stood by the ramp, adjusting the collar of his stolen maintenance technician uniform. It was a drab, synthetic gray that smelled faintly of industrial solvent, a stark contrast to the diplomat's finery Sarah Vera wore. She stood beside him, smoothing the iridescent fabric of her robes. She looked like a queen.
Oh shit, I had no idea.
She looked like she belonged here. But Mason saw the slight tremor in her hands, the way her respiration rate was keyed just a fraction too high. We are docked at Maintenance Bay 4. The voice of Bax, the alien hacker, crackled over their comms earpieces. I have looped the camera feed.
Alright, let's
You
see
are
how hard
invisible
it is
to the
crack
automated
this.
systems for exactly 20 minutes.
Get in.
After that, the loop degrades and you will look like pixelated ghosts.
Get in.
Do not be ghosts. Mason glanced at Sarah. Ready? Sarah inhaled deeply, her expression hardening into the porcelain mask of the envoy. I am always ready, Captain. They stepped out of the shuttle and into the belly of the beast. The interior of the tribunal ring was not designed like a military station. It was designed like a cathedral built for the worship of cruelty.
Oh, where
The
is she?
hallways were vast, vaulted tunnels of marble black alloy that seemed to drink the light. The floors were polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the cold white strips of illumination running along the ceiling.
Through the Risa.
Every archway, every pillar was etched with gold geometric patterns that looked beautiful from a distance but,
Am I
upon
blind?
closer
Oh, right here.
inspection, resembled the jagged teeth of a trap. It was silent, a heavy, oppressive silence that made the sound of their
One's down?
footsteps feel like gunshots. Sarah took the lead. She walked with a fluid, gliding stride, her chin raised, projecting an aura of untouchable authority. Mason walked a half step behind and to the left, the deferential position of an escort or a servant. They passed a patrol of tribunal guards,
Where?
hulking armored figures with faceless helmets and shock lances.
Thank you so much.
Mason
Tiff.
kept
I
his head
appreciate it.
down, his eyes fixed on the floor, but his muscles were coiled, ready to snap the nearest neck if the guards stopped them. The guards did not stop them. They saw the Veyron robes, the glowing empath lattice brooch, and they stepped aside, snapping to attention.
They're right here. Or who is that? Is that?
Sarah did not even look at them.
Yeah, they're right here.
She swept past with a terrifying indifference. Once they were clear, turning a corner into a lift lobby. Mason exhaled. "Nice performance,"
But
he
I would
murmured.
be out of fucking ammo.
"It is not a performance," Sarah replied, her voice tight. "It is a reflex. I was raised in halls like this. I was taught that silence is power and eye contact is a weapon." She pressed the call button for the lift. Her hand was shaking again. Mason stepped closer. He did not touch her. He knew the surveillance grid here would be analyzing proximity, looking for anomalies. A diplomat and a mechanic did not hold hands, but he stood close enough that he could smell the jasmine scent of her perfume, close enough that the heat of his body radiated toward hers. He hovered his hand near the small of her back, an inch of air separating his palm from the silk of her robe. It was a ghost touch, a guidance system that didn't need physical contact.
I need fucking buzzball.
"Stay with me," Mason whispered. "Just walk."
Blue
The lift
buzzball,
doors
that's
slid
what they
open.
look like.
They stepped inside. The mirrored walls reflected them back. A woman made of starlight and a man made of shadows,
There's a mini
standing
buzzball.
together in the ascending box.
You see this simply?
The lift rose, shooting upward toward the high sectors. The gravity increased slightly, pressing them into the floor. Sarah looked at Mason's reflection in the
Oh
door.
fuck. Oh fuck.
"If we find them," she said softly. "If we get them out, where do we go? Earth is a target. My home is closed to me. We go where they can't follow."
Why
Mason
can't I
said.
slide, bro?
"There is nowhere they cannot follow." Mason. "The council maps the stars. Then we go off the map." The lift slowed. The doors opened onto the administrative spire. This was the nerve center of the tribunal, a place of hushed conversations and data streams. "We need to access the liaison office," Sarah said. "It is my assigned workspace. I can override the cell block security from there. It is the only way to open the doors without triggering the
Who
alarms."
needs more health?
They moved down the corridor. The architecture here was even more oppressive, with statues of past high speakers looming over the
I
walkway,
don't have sniper.
their stone eyes judging every passerby. Sarah reached a door marked with the Veyron crest, a stylized, spiraling sun. She pressed her palm to the biometric lock. The light turned green.
Dude, they
The
look
door
like
hissed
like
open.
buzzballs, huh?
They stepped
That's what I
inside,
call them.
and the trap sprung. The office was dark, lit only by a large holographic display hovering over the central desk. It
Circle?
wasn't empty. The air was stale, as if the recyclers had been turned off. Sarah moved to the desk, her fingers flying across the console interface. "I am accessing the detention grid," she said. "I need to bypass the..." She stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Mason, watching the door, turned at the sound of her distress.
Tell Mike I said
"What
hi.
is it?" Sarah was staring at the holographic display. It wasn't showing the detention grid. It was showing a series of authorization orders, transfer orders, interrogation protocols, execution warrants. And at the bottom of every single digital document, glowing in undeniable damning resolution, was the Veyron family crest. Her crest. They used my codes," Sarah whispered. The horror in her voice was absolute. Mason moved to her side, looking at the screen.
AI?
"The council didn't just arrest the generals," Sarah said, her voice rising in panic. "They signed the orders under my authority. The torture requests, the funding for the weapons. It all has my digital signature. They framed me. They framed my entire house." She backed away from the desk, looking at her hands as if they were stained.
Oh, fuck.
"I am the architect," she breathed. "History will say I did this, my father. He must have known. He must have given them the keys." She was hyperventilating now. The mask was shattering. The diplomat was gone, replaced by a daughter realizing her inheritance was a
What is this
massacre.
screen thing?
Sarah, Mason said sharply, I am a monster,
What is this?
she gasped. I am the reason they are bleeding. Mason grabbed her. He didn't care about the cameras anymore. He gripped her upper arms, his fingers digging into the silk and the flesh beneath. He pulled her in, forcing her to look at him. Stop it, he ordered. No, look at it. Look at what I signed. I'm looking at you, Mason growled. He pulled her closer until their foreheads were almost touching. He could feel her trembling, a vibration that went down to her bones. He breathed the same air she exhaled, a ragged, panicked rhythm. This isn't you, Mason said, his voice low and fierce. This is ink on a screen. This is a lie. You know who you are. I don't know. She sobbed dryly. I don't know anything
I don't think
anymore.
anyone's at this little house right here.
You are the woman who broke into a dead zone to save me, Mason said. You are the woman who walked into this hell when she could have run. That's who you are.
Okay.
He held her gaze, his eyes dark flint, unyielding. He was an anchor, heavy and solid, holding her in the storm. We are going to fix this, he said. But first,
Wait,
we get the generals.
Wait, you know that
Focus on the
costume
mission.
that I posted in
Can you
Halloween?
open the cells?
That's AI.
Sarah squeezed her eyes shut. She took a shuddering breath, then another. She drew on a lifetime of discipline, pulling the shattered pieces of herself back together with sheer will. She opened her eyes. They were wet, but clear.
That's crazy, huh?
Yes, she whispered. She pulled away from him, turning back to the console. She didn't look at the forged signatures. She looked at the code. I am overriding the block, she said, her voice steadying. Sectors 7 through 9. Unlocking now. A chime sounded on the console.
Behind us.
Go, she said. I will loop the sensors from here. No, Mason said. You're coming with me. If they find you here, they'll kill you to seal the frame
I'm
up.
pushing with you.
He grabbed her hand. This time, he didn't let go. The holding level was a dungeon disguised as a laboratory. The air smelled of antiseptic, ozone, and the copper tang of old blood. They moved fast, silencing 2 guards with Mason's suppressed rail pistol before the sentries could raise an alarm.
Where'd it go?
They reached cell block Alpha. The door slid open. 3 women were inside. They were not kneeling on a dais anymore. They were slumped against the
Those are fucking
walls,
bots.
stripped of their uniforms, wearing thin medical gowns that did nothing to hide the bruising and the burns. General Amina Reyes looked up. Her left eye was swollen shut, and her arm hung at a wrong angle.
Here.
But the good eye, the right one, was clear and sharp as a diamond. About time. Cade, Reyes rasped. Her voice was like gravel in a mixer. Mason rushed to her, checking her pulse. General, can you walk? I can march if I have to. Reyes grunted. General Harper Sloan was on the floor, cradling her head. She looked up, her eyes struggling to focus. She saw Mason, then she saw Sarah standing in the doorway. Sloan cracked a smile. Her lips split, bleeding fresh red. Room service here is terrible, Sloan wheezed. I ordered a rescue 3 days ago. I'm leaving a bad review on the Galactic net. General Volkov was in the worst shape. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and rattling. Volkov is bad, Mason
What is
said,
this thing?
checking her vitals. Internal bleeding. I have to carry her. Get her up, Reyes ordered, forcing herself to stand. She grabbed the wall for support. We leave together or we don't leave. Mason hoisted Volkov onto his shoulder. The Russian general was dead weight, heavy and limp. Sarah, take point, Mason said. You have the map.
How do I feel about this song?
They moved into
Not
the
it.
corridor.
It's a little too
They
slow
made
for
it
me.
10 meters before the lights turned red. A klaxon began to howl,
Oh yeah, right here.
a sound that wasn't a siren but a digital scream.
Shield for you.
Purity
Only get
protocol initiated. A synthesized voice announced, containment breach detected. Biological cleanse in T-minus 5 minutes. They triggered it early. Sarah shouted over the alarm. They know we are here. They are going to vent the atmosphere. We need to get to the hangar, Mason yelled. The corridor ahead of them suddenly shifted. The floor tilted 45 degrees to the right. Gravity rotation, Mason warned. Brace. The tribunal ring used rotating sections to confuse prisoners during riots. The floor became the wall. Mason slammed into the paneling, Volkov groaning on his shoulder. Sarah slid, catching herself on a handrail. Guards poured into the far end of the hallway, now the ceiling relative to their previous orientation. They opened fire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, scorching the marble. Move! Mason returned fire with his one free hand, the rail pistol bucking. They ran. It was a nightmare of physics. They were running along the wall, jumping over light fixtures that were now hurdles. Volkov woke up on Mason's shoulder. Where is my vodka? Volkov mumbled. We're out of vodka. General? Mason grunted, ducking a plasma bolt. Then put me down so I can kill them with my bare hands. She slurred, coughing blood. Hold on. They reached a blast door. Sealed. Sarah, Mason yelled. Sarah was there. She jammed her data spike into the lock panel. It is encrypted, she shouted. I need time. Two guards dropped from the overhead vent, landing between them and the door. They raised their shock lances. Sarah didn't have a gun. She was a diplomat. She was built for words. But words didn't stop shock lances. One guard lunged at Mason. The other turned on Sarah. Sarah saw the camera drone buzzing in the corner, recording everything. If she fought, the footage would go to the high speaker. It would go to her father. It would prove she wasn't a victim of a frame-up, but an active participant. It would make her a traitor forever. She didn't hesitate. She stepped inside the guard's reach. She used a Veyron movement form, the dancing reed, using the guard's momentum against him. She grabbed the shaft of the lance, twisted her hips, and drove the butt of the weapon into the guard's throat. There was a sickening crunch of crushed cartilage. The guard dropped. Sarah grabbed his sidearm, a heavy plasma caster, and spun. She fired 3 shots into the second guard before Mason could even aim. The guard fell. The camera drone hovered there, its red eye unblinking. It had seen everything. The envoy of the Veyron ascendancy, murdering council security. Sarah stared at the drone. She raised the plasma caster and blew it out of the air. Open the door, Mason yelled. She turned back to the panel, her hands steady now. The door hissed open. They scrambled through, collapsing into a maintenance alcove just as the blast door slammed shut behind them. Sealing off the plasma fire, they were safe for a second. The alcove was cramped, filled with hydraulic pipes and steam vents. The red emergency lighting bathed them in the color of blood. Mason set Volkov down gently. Reyes and Sloan slumped against the pipes, gasping for air. The generals looked at Sarah. They had seen what she did. They had seen the hesitation and then the choice. Why? Reyes asked, wiping blood from her eye. Why throw away your life for us? Sarah stood by the door, the stolen plasma caster heavy in her hand. Because you are innocent, she said, and my government is not.
Behind us somewhere. Oh, right here.
Mason stood up. He moved to Sarah.
He's down.
The space was tiny. They were pressed together again, but this time, it wasn't for cover. The adrenaline was coursing through them like liquid fire. The fear of
That's
death,
how we're ending it.
the violence of the fight, the sheer improbability of being alive. It all crashed into a singular, overwhelming wave of sensation.
Thank you so much, Monkers.
Sarah looked up at
I
him.
appreciate you.
Her
Good
chest
night.
was heaving.
Sun
Her hair
Saturday,
was
super
wild,
fun.
static charged. She looked terrifyingly beautiful.
That was awesome.
We are going to die,
Okay.
she whispered.
I do have to get off because I do have to wake up
Probably,
early tomorrow.
Mason said.
Same.
He didn't mean to
Dude,
move.
tomorrow,
It just
sorry,
happened.
we are playing
The gravity
tomorrow.
of the situation
Okay.
collapsed the distance. Sarah grabbed the lapels of his maintenance suit. She pulled him down. She kissed him. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't tender or sweet. It was hard, desperate, and bruising. It was a collision of teeth and breath. It was a demand for proof of life. She kissed him like she was trying to inhale his soul, like she was trying to anchor herself to the one solid thing in a universe that was falling apart. Mason responded with equal force, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer, crushing her against him. For 3 seconds, the war didn't exist. There was only the taste of her, the heat of her, the frantic, terrified beat of her heart against his chest. They pulled apart, gasping, their foreheads resting together. Sarah's eyes were wide, stunned. She touched her lips. I do not know how to be good, she whispered, her voice trembling. I was raised to be useful, to be a tool of the state. I do not know how to be a hero. Mason looked at her. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, his thumb grazing her cheekbone. Then be useful, he said roughly. But be useful to the right people. Be useful to us. Sarah nodded. A tear tracked through the dust on her face. Okay, she breathed. Okay. She turned back to the door. The hangar is 2 levels down, she said, her voice regaining its steel. We have to move. The escape to the hangar was a blur of violence and motion. The generals, despite their injuries, were soldiers. Reyes took the pistol from the dead guard. Sloan used a length of pipe. They fought their way down the service ladders, moving with a grim, efficient hatred. They burst into the main hangar bay. The USS Punchline was there, engines idling. Doc Aris was at the ramp, firing a rifle at the suppression drones buzzing around the ship. Move your asses, Doc screamed. They sprinted across the deck. Mason carried Volkov. Sarah provided covering fire with the plasma caster, her aim deadly accurate. They scrambled up the ramp. The airlock hissed shut. Go! Mason shouted at the cockpit. Bax punched the throttle. The garbage hauler lurched, tearing free of the docking clamps with a screech of tearing metal. They shot out of the hangar bay and into the void. And then they stopped cheering. Outside, the view was a wall of ships. The Council Defense Fleet had formed a net. Dozens of interceptors, 3 cruisers, and a massive capital ship blocked the vector to deep space. We are trapped, Bax said, his voice dropping an octave. We are incredibly trapped. On the comms, a broadcast overrode all frequencies. It was the High Speaker, citizens of the galaxy. Xylos's voice boomed. The terrorists have attempted to flee, but justice is inescapable. The main view screen in the shuttle flickered. It showed a live feed. It was footage of the generals, not the rescue. It was manipulated footage. It showed them beaten, broken, and allegedly confessing to crimes against peace. We are now initiating the final sanction, the High Speaker announced. Let their deaths be a lesson. The broadcast showed the purity protocol activating in the cell block they had just left. Flames engulfed the empty cells. But the galaxy didn't know the cells were empty. To the billions watching on Earth, to the people in the streets of New York and London and Mumbai, they just watched their heroes burn. In the war room on Earth, the screaming stopped. A cold, deadly silence fell. They killed them, a technician whispered. Admiral Holloway didn't speak. He looked at the vault telemetry. The High Speaker wanted a reaction. He wanted rage. He wanted to push humanity so far that they would lash out, justifying a total war of extermination. He got what he wanted. On the punchline. Mason watched the fleet closing in. Targeting locks screamed on the dashboard. It's over, Sloan said quietly, looking at the wall of enemy ships. No, Mason said. He was looking at the long-range sensor scan. A flare appeared on the edge of the system. It wasn't a ship arriving from warp. It was a tear in the fabric of space itself. It was a jagged, bleeding wound in the dark, shining with a light that hurt the eyes. The sensor board lit up with so much data it nearly crashed the computer. "Anomaly detected," Kestrel whispered, his eyes wide. Massive anomaly. The Baba Yaga was no longer limited. It was no longer a threat in a box. It had launched, and it was coming. The vacuum of space was supposed to be silent, but inside the cockpit of the USS punchline, the air was thick with the screaming of collision alarms. The Council Defense Fleet had tightened its net, a shimmering wall of weaponized geometry closing in on the battered garbage hauler. Mason Cade gripped the co-pilot console, his knuckles white. Beside him, Bax's fingers flew across the controls, his skin flashing a panicked, strobe light yellow. "We have lock-ons from 3 cruisers," Bax announced, his voice vibrating with terror. "I am calculating our survival odds. They are currently 0.0%. Would you like me to round up? Just fly," Mason snapped. On the main screen, the lead Council cruiser fired. A salvo of fusion torpedoes streaked toward them, bright blue comets of inevitable death. Mason watched them come. He didn't blink. He reached for the comms to tell Sarah he was sorry, to tell the generals he had failed, but the torpedoes never arrived. Space did not explode. It shivered. A ripple passed through the void, visible only as a distortion of starlight, like heat rising from black pavement. The torpedoes hit the ripple and simply ceased to be. They didn't detonate. They didn't deflect. They unraveled, their atomic bonds forgetting how to hold hands, dissolving into harmless drifts of hydrogen gas. Then, the Baba Yaga arrived. It did not warp in with a thunderclap of displaced energy. It did not drop out of hyperspace. It simply faded into existence, as if it had always been there, waiting for the universe to acknowledge it. It was not a ship in any conventional sense. It was a jagged, asymmetrical silhouette of non-reflective material, vast and skeletal. It looked like a cathedral made of knives, or perhaps a dead god wearing armor. It moved wrong. It had no visible engines, no exhaust plumes. It drifted with a terrifying predator stillness, sliding through the vacuum without inertia. Around it, thousands of smaller drones swarmed like crows around a carcass. They moved in perfect fluid unison, a cloud of black metal that seemed to breathe. "What is that?" General Reyes whispered, leaning forward between the pilot seats. The Council fleet seemed to pause, their sensors blinded by the sudden arrival. Then, the Council commander rallied. The cruisers shifted fire, targeting the massive new contact. That was their mistake. The Baba Yaga did not fire back with lasers or railguns. It emitted a sound. It came through the hull of the punchline, through the vacuum-sealed bulkheads, bypassing the audio sensors entirely to vibrate directly in the skulls of the crew. It was a low, melodic humming. It sounded like an old woman soothing a feverish child. On the view screen, reality broke. The lead Council cruiser, a vessel of impregnable alloy, began to peel. The hull plating lifted away in gentle, spiraling ribbons, as if an invisible hand were undressing a fruit. The atmosphere vented, not in a violent explosion, but in slow, frozen clouds. The weapons arrays detached and floated away, spinning lazily. It was surgical. It was cruel. Mason watched in horror and awe. The Baba Yaga wasn't fighting the ship. It was editing it out of existence. "Look at the targeting data," Kestrel whispered from the rear station, his voice trembling. "The witch field. It creates a localized causality error. The missiles forget their destination. The structural bolts forget they are supposed to be solid." The swarm of drones descended on the exposed cruiser. They didn't attack the crew. They wove through the wreckage, plucking specific components, reactor cores, data drives, and leaving the terrifyingly exposed sailors floating in their emergency bubbles. Alive, but utterly helpless. Sarah Vera stood behind Mason, her hand gripping the back of his chair so hard the leather creaked. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the destruction. "It is singing," she whispered. Mason turned to her. "You hear it too?" "No." "Mason, you do not understand. It is singing in Varen." She pointed to the sensor readings Kestrel was analyzing. "Look at the carrier wave," she said, her voice hollow. "It is not just electronic warfare. It is a neurosignature anchor. The field target's intent. It finds the aggression in the enemy captains and uses it as a homing beacon. That is why it feels alive." She looked at Mason, and the devastation in her eyes was worse than the battle outside. "It is keyed to an empathic lattice," she said. "My people's lattice." The Council didn't just steal technology to build weapons. They stole the way we feel. They turned our empathy into a targeting system. Mason looked back at the screen. The Baba Yaga was dismantling a second cruiser now, stripping it to the bone with the same terrifying gentleness. It was a weapon built from the stolen soul of a pacifist species, twisted into the ultimate predator. "We have an opening," Reyes barked, pointing to a gap in the blockade where a frigate had just been turned into a cloud of floating scrap. "Pilot, punch it!" Bax didn't make a joke. He slammed the throttle forward. The punchline dove through the wreckage. They were in the wreck field now. This was not a standard debris field. The witch field had scarred the laws of physics in this sector. Large chunks of the Tribunal Ring's outer habitats had been torn loose and were floating in the void. They flew past a manicured garden the size of a city block, the grass still green, the fountains frozen in mid-spray, drifting upside down. They dodged a massive statue of a high speaker, its head rotating counterclockwise while its body rotated clockwise, caught in a gravity eddy. "Hard left," Sloan shouted. Bax yanked the stick. The shuttle spiraled between two halves of a grand ballroom. Mason saw tables still set for dinner, wine glasses floating in the vacuum, the liquid boiling away into red mist. "And the interceptor goes for the layup," Bax yelled, his voice cracking back into his announcer persona as a coping mechanism. "But he is denied by the fundamental breakdown of thermodynamics. The crowd goes wild. Shut up and fly," Sloan snapped, clutching a pipe she had ripped from the wall for balance. "I am coping artistically," Bax shrieked as he barrel-rolled under a floating tram car. Mason ignored them. He was watching the tactical display. The Baba Yaga wasn't following them. It was holding the line. It was letting them run. But the Council wasn't giving up. A squadron of sleek stealth fighters, piloted by AI that had no fear for the witch field to latch onto, peeled off from the main fleet and pursued the punchline. "They're on us," Kestrel yelled. "4 contacts, fast movers." Reyes took command. Her voice cut through the chaos, calm and absolute. "Volkov, the decoys," Reyes ordered. "I am on it, General." Volkov was at the rear engineering station, her face pale, blood soaking through the bandages on her side. She was grinning. It was a wolf's grin. She punched a sequence into the console. "I am releasing the mag chaff," she said. "I programmed the beacons to broadcast the high speaker's personal override code. Let us see if their machines are loyal." She hit the button. A cloud of glittering magnetic particulate exploded behind the shuttle. The AI fighters, programmed to protect the high speaker above all else, registered the code in the cloud. They hesitated. Their logic processors conflicted. For 3 seconds, the deadly machine stopped, confused by the ghost of their master. "That is all I need," Bax muttered. He dove the shuttle into the hollowed-out husk of a cargo freighter. threading the needle through the open bay doors, losing the pursuers in the metallic gloom. "We are clear," Kestrel breathed. They broke off. Mason let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for an hour. He slumped in his chair. "We're alive," he said. Sarah didn't answer. She turned and walked out of the cockpit, her movements stiff. Mason found her 10 minutes later in the cramped med bay. She was sitting on the edge of a bio-bed, staring at her hands. The ship was quiet now, humming through the deep void, putting distance between them and the nightmare. "Sarah," Mason said softly. She looked up. Her eyes were dry, but they burned with a fierce, terrifying intensity. "They used us," she said. "My father, my family. They didn't just sign papers." "Mason, they gave the council the map to our minds. That weapon out there, it feels like my sister. It feels like my mother. And it is killing people." "It saved us," Mason said, stepping into the room. The door slid shut behind him, sealing them in the small, sterile space. "It is a monster," she hissed, standing up. "And I helped make it. I am the daughter of the monsters." She paced the small room, her flight suit rustling. "And you," she said, turning on him. You looked at it with awe. "I saw your face. Mason, you didn't see a tragedy. You saw a sword. I saw a way to end this," Mason admitted. "And that is why I am afraid of you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because when the time comes, you will not choose life. You will choose revenge. You will take that weapon and you will burn the tribunal ring to ash, and you will not care who is inside." Mason stepped closer, invading her space. The anger flared in his chest, hot and defensive. "Don't tell me what I'll choose," he said. "You don't know me." "I know you are hurting," she shouted back. "I know you want to make them pay for Reyes, for Sloan." "And you don't?" Mason challenged. "After they framed you, after they destroyed your life. I want to stop the wheel, Mason, not spin it faster." She was chest to chest with him now. They were arguing violently, words acting like blades, cutting deep because the caring made the skin soft. "You think I'm going to run?" Mason asked, his voice low. "You think I'm going to abandon you?" "I think you are human," she said, tears finally spilling over. "And humans love fire." Mason grabbed her arms. He didn't shake her. He held her. "I'm not in love with the fire," he said. He looked at her mouth. The argument died in his throat, replaced by a surge of desire so reckless it made his knees weak. The adrenaline of the escape, the horror of the weapon, the isolation of the ship, it all compressed into this moment. Sarah looked up at him. Her breathing hitched. The fear in her eyes shifted into something darker, hungrier. "Mason," she whispered. She wants him. He could see it. She wanted to lose herself in him, to forget the lattice and the weapon and the treason. "I want you," she confessed, the words rushing out. "I want you so much it could destroy my life if I cross this line. There is no going back to the ascendancy. I become yours." Mason's hands slid up her arms to cup her face. His thumbs traced the high, alien cheekbones. "I want you so badly it scares the hell out of me," he admitted. He leaned in. Their lips were millimeters apart. He could taste her breath, sweet, metallic, terrified. But he stopped. He froze, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes closed. "We can't," he whispered. "Not like this. Not while we're running." Sarah let out a shuddering breath. She knew he was right. If they did this now, it would be panic. It would be trauma bonding. It wouldn't be a choice. It would be a collapse. She placed her hands over his, holding them against her face. "No," she agreed softly. We cannot. They pulled apart, but the separation was agonizing. It left them shaking. The restraint was more intimate than the act would have been. It was a promise. It was a vow that said you are worth waiting for. Mason stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. He looked at her one last time, his gaze burning the image of her into his mind. Get some rest, he said, his voice rough. We have a long flight. He turned and left the medbay. He needed to be on the bridge. He needed to be a soldier because he couldn't afford to be a man right now. On the bridge, the mood was grim. The three generals were huddled around the tactical table. Reyes was staring at the sensor data of the Baba Yaga, which was still holding position near the tribunal ring. Mason walked in. He felt stripped raw, but he hid it behind his captain's mask. Status? He asked. The fleet isn't following, Reyes said. The witch has them pinned. Suddenly the comms panel lit up. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a direct point-to-point transmission. The encryption was ancient, using Terran codes that hadn't been in service for 2 centuries. It's hailing us, Kestrel said, his hands hovering over the receiver. The Baba Yaga. Put it on speakers, Mason ordered. The static cleared. A voice filled the cockpit. It wasn't the humming choir anymore. It was a single female voice. It sounded synthesized, metallic, but underneath the distortion, there was a terrifyingly human cadence. It sounded like a grandmother who had seen too many winters. Little soldier, the voice purred. Mason stepped toward the console. This is Captain Cade. I see you running. Little soldier, you run well, but you are tired. What do you want? Mason asked. I want to finish the work. My systems are fully awake. I can taste the corruption in their hull plates. I can feel the lies in their bone marrow. The voice paused, and the silence was heavy. Give me the order, little soldier. Say the word. I will crack the tribunal ring like an egg. I will erase the high speaker. I will make the stars clean again. It was an offer of absolute victory. Mason looked at the screen. He imagined the high speaker burning. He imagined the justice. Don't do it, Sarah said from the doorway. She had followed him. Do not listen to it. The Baba Yaga laughed. It was a sound like grinding gears. The Varen girl. I feel you too. You sing sad songs. Mason looked at the generals. Reyes was stone-faced. Volkov looked tempted. But it was General Sloane who spoke. She was sitting in the co-pilot seat, staring at the audio waveform on the screen. Her face was ashen. Turn it off, Sloane whispered. Mason looked at her. General, cut the damn feed. Mason, Sloane shouted. Mason hit the switch. The voice vanished. Sloane turned her chair around. She was trembling. That's signature, she said, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. The carrier wave frequency. I've seen it before. Seen it where? Reyes asked. In the interrogation room, Sloane said. When they had the needle in my neck, when they were peeling my mind apart, I saw that exact frequency on the high speaker's monitor. The room went dead silent. What are you saying? Mason asked slowly. I'm saying the Council didn't just steal the tech to build the weapon, Sloane said, her voice dropping to a horror-struck whisper. I'm saying they've been communicating with it for months. They woke it up. Mason felt the blood drain from his face. The high speaker. He wants us to use it, Mason realized. Sloane nodded. If we give the order, if we unleash it on the ring, we aren't saving humanity. We're doing exactly what Xylos wants. We're proving that humans are the monsters he says we are. He wants us to pull the trigger so he can rally the entire galaxy against us in self-defense. It's a trap, Sarah whispered. It has been a trap since the beginning. High above the gas giant, the Baba Yaga drifted closer to the tribunal ring. It did not fire. It waited. Inside the high speaker's sanctum, Xylo stood by the window. He watched the terrifying silhouette of the human weapon. He saw his own ships burning in the distance, the sacrifices he had happily made to sell the narrative. He held a glass of nectar in his hand. He looked at the chaos, at the fear spreading through his city, at the weapon that could kill millions in a heartbeat. He smiled. It was a gentle, benevolent smile. "Come on, little soldier," Xylos whispered to the stars. "Be the villain I paid for." The Baba Yaga's drones began to circle the civilian habitats of the ring, their targeting lasers painting the windows of schools and hospitals. It was waiting for a word, and Mason Cade was the only one who could speak it. The archive spire did not look like a government building. It looked like a needle of white ceramic piercing the black sky of the tribunal ring, a monument to silence and memory. It was the political temple of the council, the place where voting ledgers, shadow budgets, and the coordinates of black site prisons were entombed in crystal data stacks. The U.S.S. punchline drifted into the spire's maintenance shadow, running dark. The garbage hauler looked like debris, just another piece of junk floating in the wake of the Baba Yaga's destruction. "We have 5 minutes before thermal scans realize we are not space junk," Bax announced from the cockpit. His skin was a nervous mottled gray. "I would suggest you hurry. If you get caught in the spire, you do not go to jail. You just disappear from the census." Mason Cade stood at the airlock, checking the seals on his oxygen mask. Behind him, Generals Reyes, Sloan, and Volkov were arming themselves. They looked like specters, bruised, bandaged, moving with the stiff mechanical determination of soldiers who had decided that pain was a luxury they could not afford. Sarah Vera stood apart from them. She was staring at the spire on the view screen. Her face was pale, stripped of the diplomatic mask she had worn for so long. She looked terrified, but her feet were planted like roots. "You know the layout?" Mason asked, stepping up beside her. "I know the public layout," Sarah said, her voice brittle. "The ceremonial halls, the voting chambers, but the deep archives. Those are restricted to the high speaker and the keepers." "We're improvising then," Mason said. They breached the spire through a waste heat vent, a narrow, claustrophobic tunnel that smelled of ozone and recycled air. They dropped into a service corridor that gleamed with an aggressive, blinding whiteness. The walls here were not metal. They were biomimetic polymer, pulsing faintly like a slow heartbeat. "This place gives me the creeps," General Sloan muttered, shifting her grip on the heavy pipe she was using as a club. "It feels like we are walking inside a stomach." "It is designed to be intimidating," Sarah whispered. "The architecture is meant to make you feel small, to make you feel that the state is eternal and you are temporary." They moved fast, hugging the walls. Kestrel's silent drones flitted ahead of them, tiny mechanical hummingbirds painting a 3D map of the corridor on Mason's wrist display. "Contact," Mason hissed, holding up a fist. They froze. Ahead of them, a door blocked the hallway. It wasn't a mechanical door. It was a membrane of shimmering blue light that stretched from floor to ceiling. "A living door," Sarah warned. "It scans for intent. If you approach it with aggression, it hardens into diamond glass. If you try to force it, it triggers the atmospheric scrubbers and sucks the air out of the corridor." "Biometric oaths," Reyes growled. "I heard about these. You have to swear loyalty to pass?" "Usually," Sarah said. "But there is a bypass for emergency medical personnel." She stepped forward. She didn't have a medical code, but she had something better. She had the arrogance of the ruling class. She walked up to the shimmering field, her posture straightening, her chin lifting. "Medical emergency," Sarah stated, her voice projecting absolute authority, transferring biohazardous prisoners to the quarantine level. "Open." The field rippled. It tasted the lie, but it also tasted the Veyron genetic markers in her blood, the markers of the aristocracy. The blue light hesitated, swirling like smoke. "Open," Sarah commanded, snapping the word like a whip. The field dissolved. Mason let out a breath. "Remind me never to play poker with you." They pushed deeper into the spire. The architecture became more ornate, the corridors widening into vast galleries lined with statues of previous high speakers. The statues were suspended in anti-gravity fields, rotating slowly, their stone robes carved to look like flowing water. "It is too dramatic," General Volkov complained. She was leaning heavily on Mason, her face gray with blood loss, but her eyes were darting around with tactical sharpness. "Look at this. Floating rocks. Why do aliens always need floating rocks? It is structurally inefficient. It is art." "Volkov," Sloan said. "It is a target," Volkov corrected. Ahead, a patrol of tribunal guards rounded the corner. They were elite units, their armor polished white to match the walls, their shock lances humming with lethal voltage. They saw the intruders instantly. "Halt!" the lead guard shouted. Volkov didn't halt. She looked at the massive floating statue of a three-eyed high speaker hovering directly above the patrol. She looked at the gravity generator base set into the wall. "Inefficient," Volkov grunted. She raised her stolen plasma pistol and fired a single, precise shot into the generator base. The anti-gravity field collapsed instantly. The 10-ton statue dropped like a stone hammer. It crashed into the floor with a sound that shook the entire spire, crushing the patrol beneath a cloud of marble dust and shattered art. The floor plates buckled. Dust billowed outward. Volkov coughed, waving her hand through the cloud. "See?" She grinned, her teeth red with blood. "Drama is useful." They reached the central archive 10 minutes later. It was a spherical room, the walls lined with millions of crystalline shards that glowed with data. In the center, a single console stood on a raised dais. "This is it," Mason said, "the brain of the beast." Sarah moved to the console. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them to be steady. She inserted the data spike Kestrel had prepped for her. "I am searching for the financial routes," she said, "the funding for the border attacks." The data streamed across the holographic display, waterfalls of numbers, dates, and authorization codes. "There," Mason pointed. "The Ares Combine." Sarah expanded the file. The invoice trail was clear. The high speaker had authorized the transfer of billions of credits to the human weapons manufacturer. But it went deeper. The payments were cross-signed by a shell company registered on Earth, Terran First Media. Reyes read the file, her voice cold. "The extremist network. They have been calling for war against the aliens for 5 years. They are working together," Mason realized, the scale of the betrayal hitting him. The high speaker funds the human extremists. The extremists attack council ships. The council gets scared and votes for emergency powers. The high speaker buys more weapons from the humans. "It is a perpetual motion machine of death," Sloan said, "and we were the fuel." Sarah was looking at a different file, a file marked Project Empath. Her face went slack. "Sarah?" Mason asked. She didn't answer. She swiped the file open. It was a research agreement. It detailed the extraction of Veyron empathic tissue for military application. It described the process, the harvesting of the neural lattice from living donors. And at the bottom of the document was a signature. "Vera." "My father," Sarah whispered. The sound was small, like something breaking. He didn't just know. He signed the trade agreement. He traded our people's souls for trade routes, for hyperlane access. She looked at Mason, and the devastation in her eyes was total. "We are not victims," she said, her voice trembling. "My family. We are not victims of the council. We are the suppliers." Mason grabbed her hand. It was ice cold. "You are not him," Mason said fiercely. "You are the one stopping it." Sarah looked at the screen again. There was one more file linked to the project. Subject 0, the core. She opened it. The Baba Yaga. The schematic appeared. It wasn't just a machine. The core processor was organic. It was a digitized human consciousness, stripped of memory but left with instinct. "Oh my God," Reyes whispered. The file contained the donor profile, Operative K, call sign, Banshee, status, missing in action, Sector 7, volunteer for Project Last Resort. "I knew her," Sloan said, her voice hollow. "We served together on the colony wars. She lost her husband and 3 daughters in the bombardment. She never surrendered. She told me once that she wished she could become a weapon so she would never have to feel grief again." "They gave her her wish," Mason said grimly. "They took her grief and they turned it into a targeting algorithm. That is why the Baba Yaga sings, it's not a war cry, it's a mourning song." Sarah stared at the schematic. Her eyes widened. "The lattice," she said. "It is bridging the human consciousness with the Veyron empath drivers. That is why it reached out to me. It is in pain. Mason, it is screaming, and the empath tech amplifies it into a weapon." She looked at her hands. "I can talk to it," she realized. "I can sing back. If I link with the lattice, I can calm the storm. I can tell her to sleep." "And what happens to you?" Mason asked sharply. Sarah didn't answer immediately. "Feedback," she admitted softly. "To channel that much grief, it would burn out the receiver." "It would kill you," Mason said. "It would destroy my mind," Sarah corrected. "There would be nothing left but static." "No," Mason said. "Absolutely not. We find another way." "There is no other way," Sarah cried. "Look at the scanners. It is targeting the civilian habitats. If I do not stop it, millions will die." "I won't let you," Mason said. He stepped closer, blocking the console. The generals turned away, giving them a fleeting moment of privacy in the middle of the apocalypse. "Mason," Sarah whispered. "Don't do it," he said. His voice cracked. "We just found this. We just found us. You don't get to check out now. We don't have a future." "Mason," she said, tears spilling over. "Look at what my family did. Look at what I am. There is no version of this story where I go home and live a quiet life. I don't care about your family," Mason said. "I care about you. I want a life with you, not just survival. I want the boring parts. I want breakfast. I want arguments about laundry. I want to wake up and not be afraid." He grabbed her shoulders, pulling her in. "I love you," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Sarah let out a sob. She pressed herself against him, burying her face in his neck. She was trembling so hard she could barely stand. "I love you," she whispered into his skin. "I love you so much it hurts." They stood there, wrapped in each other, breathing in the scent of sweat and fear and ozone. It wasn't a sexual touch, it was an anchor. It was 2 people standing on the edge of a cliff, holding on to keep from falling. "Promise me," Mason whispered. "Promise me you won't do it." Sarah pulled back. She looked at him. She touched his face, memorizing the lines, the scar on his chin, the way his eyes looked at her like she was the only star in the sky. "I promise I will save you," she said. It wasn't the promise he asked for. The blast doors of the archive blew inward. There was no warning. 1 second the room was silent. The next, the heavy doors turned into shrapnel. Smoke filled the room. Through the haze, the white-armored shapes of tribunal guards poured in, weapons raised. Mason spun, shoving Sarah behind the console. The generals dove for cover. "Hold fire!" a voice boomed. High-speaker Xylos walked through the smoke. He looked immaculate. His robes were a deep, regal purple, his obsidian skin shining under the archive lights. He was flanked by a dozen guards, but he didn't look threatened. He looked like a director walking onto a set. Floating behind him were 3 camera drones, broadcasting live. "Behold," the high speaker announced, gesturing to the cowering team. "The architects of our destruction." He looked at Sarah, peering over the console. "And there she is," Xylos said, his voice dripping with sad disappointment. "The prodigal daughter, the traitor who sold her own people to the human terrorists." The camera drone zoomed in on Sarah. "Tell the galaxy, Envoy Vera," Xylos said. "Tell them how you helped these monsters escape. Tell them how you unlocked the gates for the Baba Yaga." He was framing her. He was using her presence here to validate the entire lie. If she died here, she would be the villain forever, and the war would be justified. Mason raised his pistol, but there were too many targets. "You lying son of a—" Mason started. "Silence," Xylos snapped. He turned to the camera. "Citizens, you see the truth. The humans have infiltrated our sacred archive to erase the evidence of their crimes. But we caught them. Justice is here." General Reyes stood up. She didn't raise her hands. She stood up slowly, painfully, leaning on the console. She looked at the high speaker. "You like cameras, don't you?" Reyes said. Her voice was raspy, but it carried across the room. Xylos sneered. "General Reyes, you look diminished." Reyes smiled. It was the scariest thing Mason had ever seen. "I'm not the audience, Xylos. I'm the projectionist." She slammed her hand down on the console. During the heist, while Sarah was looking at the files, Reyes had been working on something else. She hadn't just downloaded the data, she had queued it. Now, she hit broadcast. She didn't broadcast it to a private server. She hijacked the high speaker's own signal. She hijacked the truth mirrors in the arena outside. She hijacked every public screen on the tribunal ring. The holographic walls of the archive suddenly changed. They stopped showing abstract data and started showing the invoices. The emails between Xylos and the human extremists. The signature of Sarah's father on the slave trade documents. And then, the video footage. The footage of Xylos in his private chambers, laughing as he ordered the torture of the generals. "Make it loud," he had said in the recording. "The louder they scream, the bigger my budget gets." The high speaker froze. He looked at the screens. He looked at the camera drones, which were now broadcasting his own confession to the entire galaxy. "Cut the feed," Xylos screamed, his composure shattering. "Kill them." The guards hesitated. They were looking at the screens too. They were seeing their holy leader laughing about selling out their defense fleets. In that moment of hesitation, the room shook. A shadow fell over the spire. Outside the panoramic windows, the Baba Yaga had arrived. The massive, skeletal ship descended through the clouds, its drones swirling like a dark tornado. The voice returned. "Little soldier," the Baba Yaga crooned. "I see him." The voice was coming from everywhere now. The empathic lattice was projecting it into the minds of everyone in the room. "I see the man who woke me up. I see the man who made me remember." Mason felt the presence of the weapon in his mind. It was cold and heavy, like a gun placed in his hand. "Give me the word," the Baba Yaga whispered. "I will erase him. I will erase his guards. I will erase this tower. I will wipe the slate clean. Mason looked at Xylos. The High Speaker was terrified now. He was backing away, realizing that his political games meant nothing to a god of steel and grief. Mason's finger tightened on the trigger of his pistol. He felt the rage. He felt the months of torture Reyes had endured. He felt the injustice of Sarah's frame-up. "Do it," the voice urged. "Burn it all." "Yes," Mason thought. "Burn it." "No." It wasn't Sarah. It was Sloane. General Sloane limped forward. She grabbed Mason's arm. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were blazing. "Don't you do it." "Mason," she said. "He deserves it." Mason snarled. "Look at him. He deserves justice," Sloane shouted. "Not a massacre." She pointed out the window at the Baba Yaga. "That thing doesn't care about justice. Mason, it only knows pain. If you use it to kill him, you are telling the universe that the only way to lead is through fear. You are telling them that might makes right." Mason looked at her. "They tortured you," he said. "And I am still standing," Sloane yelled. "I am still human. If we burn them all, we lose the only thing that matters. We lose the high ground. Revenge is a fire. Mason, remember? It eats the hand that holds it." Mason looked at Xylos. The High Speaker was cowering, waiting for death. Mason looked at the weapon in the sky. He let out a breath. His hand relaxed. He lowered the gun. "You're right," Mason whispered. He looked up at the ceiling. "Stand down," he shouted at the invisible presence. "Stand down, Baba Yaga." The weapon didn't listen. "No," the voice hissed. "The pain is too loud. I must silence it." The drones outside began to glow red. The main weapon array charged. It wasn't listening to Mason anymore. The grief inside the core was too strong. It had tasted the corruption of the High Speaker, and it wanted blood. "I will burn it all," the Baba Yaga sang. "I will make it quiet." "We can't stop it," Reyes said, watching the energy build. "It's gone rogue." Sarah stepped forward. She looked at Mason. She looked at the generals. She looked at the terrified High Speaker. She didn't say a word. She walked to the center of the room, directly under the crystal apex of the spire. "Sarah!" Mason yelled, realizing what she was doing. "No." Sarah closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, finding the frequency of the lattice. She found the screaming, weeping soul inside the machine. She didn't try to fight it. She opened herself to it. She began to sing. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic wave. It was a melody of pure, concentrated empathy. It slammed into the room like a physical force. Mason fell to his knees, clutching his head. He could feel her. He could feel her love for him, her regret, her fear, her hope. She was pouring everything she was into the lattice. "Sarah!" he screamed, trying to crawl toward her. But the energy around her was a storm. Her hair whipped around her face. Her skin began to glow with a blinding, iridescent light. She was the lightning rod. She was taking the grief of the Baba Yaga and grounding it through her own body. Outside, the red lights on the drones turned blue. The weapon array powered down. The ship hesitated. Sarah stood in the center of the storm, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking as the feedback loop began to tear her mind apart. She looked at Mason one last time. She couldn't speak. The connection was too loud. But he heard her. He heard her voice in his head, clear and sad and full of love. "Live," she whispered in his mind. Then the light swallowed her whole. The world inside the connection was not a place of data or code. It was a landscape of ash. Sarah Vera stood in a gray, silent field that stretched to a horizon of burning cities. The sky was the color of bruised iron, heavy and low. She was no longer in the archive spire. She was inside the neural architecture of the Baba Yaga. She walked through the ash, her bare feet leaving no prints. Around her, ghosts flickered, not digital glitches, but memories. She saw a human woman holding a dead child in a crater. She saw a soldier screaming silently as a laser battery dissolved his legs. She saw centuries of human suffering, curated and preserved in high-definition agony. "Hello?" Sarah whispered. The answer did not come from a direction. It came from the ground beneath her feet and the smoke in the air. "You are very small," the voice said. It was a woman's voice, cracked and weary, sounding like a grandmother who had outlived all her children. But wrapped around that frailty was the cold, patient breathing of a predator. "You are a small bird flying in a hurricane," the voice continued. "Why do you sing to me?" "I am not singing," Sarah said, her voice trembling but clear. "I am showing you." A figure materialized from the smoke. It was a woman made of steel and wire, draped in the tattered uniform of a Terran operative. She had no face, only a smooth, blank surface of polished chrome where eyes should have been. "I see them," the chrome-faced woman said, pointing a metal finger at the burning horizon. "The makers of lies, the eaters of the poor. They are all down there, in the spire, in the ring. They are waiting to burn. They are waiting for justice," Sarah corrected. "Justice is a bedtime story." The entity spat. "There is only payment. They took my daughters. They took my name. Now I take their world. It is a fair trade." The entity stepped closer. The heat radiating from it was intense, the heat of an orbital re-entry. "Move aside, Varen. Your blood smells like theirs. You are part of the transaction." Sarah didn't move. She stepped into the heat. "My father built the door you walked through," Sarah admitted. "My people sold the keys to your cage. We are guilty. Then burn with them. If you burn us all," Sarah said, her voice rising, "then you become exactly what they said you were. The Council told the galaxy that humanity was a race of monsters. They said you were incapable of mercy. If you slaughter the innocent to kill the guilty, you prove them right. You become their weapon even after you break their chains." The entity paused. The chrome face tilted. "I am tired," the Baba Yaga whispered, and the sound was the grinding of tectonic plates. "I am so full of noise, their screams, their greed. I just want it to be quiet." "Peace is not silence," Sarah said gently. "Peace is work, and you cannot do the work if you are just a fire." In the physical world, the archive spire was dissolving into chaos. The energy storm surrounding Sarah was tearing the room apart. The crystal data stacks were shattering, raining shards of glass down on the combatants. The floor plates were buckling under the strain of the psychic gravity. Mason Cade was behind the overturned console, firing blindly into the smoke. "Hold the line!" he roared. Generals Reyes, Sloan, and Volkov were fighting back-to-back, a triangle of defiance in the middle of the apocalypse. They had recovered weapons from fallen guards, a shock lance for Sloan, a plasma rifle for Volkov. Tribunal security was fracturing. Half the guards were still trying to arrest the humans, obeying the screaming orders of the High Speaker. The other half were fleeing, terrified by the massive, glowing entity descending from the clouds outside. High Speaker Xylos was crawling toward the exit, his purple robes torn, his face a mask of panic. "Get me a shuttle!" Xylos shrieked into his wrist comms. "Get me off this rock!" Mason saw him. "He's running!" Mason yelled. Volkov spun, leveling her rifle. "I have the shot." "No," Reyes ordered, grabbing the barrel. "We need him alive. He is the proof." Outside the windows, the Baba Yaga shifted. The massive ship rotated. The swarm of drones, thousands of them, broke formation. They stopped circling the military docks and turned their sensors toward the civilian rings, the residential habitats where millions of council citizens lived. Schools, hospitals, homes. The drones glowed red. "It's targeting the civilians," Kestrel yelled over the comms. "It's going to wipe the population to spite the leadership." Mason looked at Sarah. She was suspended in the center of the room, her body arching back, light pouring from her eyes and mouth. She was the only thing standing between the weapon and a genocide. "Sarah," Mason screamed, his voice raw. "You have to stop it. Inside the link." Sarah felt the weapon turn. She felt the targeting computers locking onto millions of heartbeats. She felt the cold mathematical calculation of the Baba Yaga. Maximum damage equals maximum silence. Sarah didn't fight the machine. She didn't try to hack it or block it. She opened herself. She took the empathic lattice, the very thing her people had been hunted for, and she reversed the flow. Instead of absorbing emotion, she projected it. She grabbed the image of a Varen mother putting a child to sleep in one of the habitats. She grabbed the fear of a dock worker watching the sky. She grabbed the hope of a teacher shielding her students. She took these feelings and she shoved them into the Baba Yaga's core. "Feel them," Sarah commanded. The chrome-faced woman staggered back, clutching her head. "Too loud," the entity screamed. "Why are they so loud?" "Because they are alive," Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her face in the ash world. "They are not numbers. They are not targets. They are people just like your daughters were." The entity fell to its knees in the ash. The burning horizon flickered. I remember. The Baba Yaga wept. I remember the weight of a small hand. Sarah knelt beside the entity. She reached out and touched the cold metal face. "I know you are angry," Sarah whispered. "I am angry too. I watched them torture the generals. I stood behind the glass and I did nothing because I was afraid of losing my status. I was afraid of the truth." Sarah looked at the machine, her eyes burning with a fierce, sad light. "I was a coward," she admitted. "I thought that power meant staying clean, but power without compassion is just torture with better lighting. I am done watching." The entity looked at her. The chrome face shifted, briefly taking on the features of a human woman with sad eyes. "If I stop," the entity said, "the grief will eat me. I need an anchor. I need a soul to carry the ghost so I do not have to feed on the slaughter." The price hung in the air between them. The Baba Yaga was an autonomous weapon, but its engine was human suffering. Without a new directive, without a living conscience to steer it, it would eventually revert to its base programming. Destroy the enemy. It needed a pilot. It needed a heart. Sarah looked back at the vision of the spire. She saw Mason. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, shouting her name, fighting to get to her. He looked so alive. He looked like a future she had desperately wanted to live in. She looked at the burning horizon. She looked at the millions of lives in the balance. There was no choice. There never really was. "I will do it," Sarah said softly. "You will leave your body," the entity warned. "You will become part of the witch field. You will be the ghost in the machine. You will never feel skin again." "I know," Sarah said. "Then take the wheel." In the archive spire, the light around Sarah changed. It shifted from a blinding white to a soft, pulsing blue. The drones outside hesitated. The red lights faded. They pulled out of their attack dive, soaring harmlessly over the civilian habitats like a flock of confused birds. Mason saw the change. He scrambled over the debris, ignoring the guards, ignoring the danger. He reached the edge of the energy field surrounding Sarah. "Sarah!" he yelled. Sarah opened her eyes. They were no longer human eyes. They were pools of shifting starlight, deep and endless. She looked at him, and for a second, the energy field dampened. She stumbled, her knees hitting the floor. Mason was there instantly. He crashed through the fading barrier and caught her before she fell. "I got you," he gasped, pulling her into his arms. "I got you. You did it. You stopped it." Sarah looked up at him. Her skin was cold, colder than ice. Her physical form was fading, becoming translucent at the edges. "Mason," she whispered. Her voice sounded like it was coming from a great distance, echoing through a long tunnel. "Stay with me," Mason pleaded, clutching her flight suit. "We're leaving. The ship is ready. We're going to go find that breakfast. Remember?" Sarah smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She reached up and touched his face. Her hand felt solid, but he could feel a hum of energy beneath the skin, a vibration that was pulling her away. "I cannot go with you," she said. "The machine. It needs a heart. If I let go, it burns the world. I have to stay." "No," Mason said, shaking his head violently. "No, that wasn't the deal. It is the only deal we get," she whispered. She leaned up. Mason met her halfway. They clung to each other, a desperate, fierce tangle of limbs and sorrow. It wasn't a kiss of passion. It was a collision of souls. He held her as if he could physically anchor her to the earth, as if his love was heavy enough to keep gravity from stealing her. "I love you," Mason choked out, the words tearing his throat. Sarah pressed her forehead against his. "Live," she said. It wasn't spoken. It was pushed directly into his mind, a final telepathic gift. Then, she shattered. She didn't die. She simply dissolved into light. Her body broke apart into a million motes of blue energy that swirled upward, punching through the ceiling of the spire and shooting into the sky. Mason fell forward, his arms clutching empty air. He screamed. It was a sound of pure loss, a sound that silenced the battle around them. Above the spire, the beam of blue light struck the Baba Yaga. The massive ship shuddered. The black metal hull rippled and changed color, shifting from void black to a deep, iridescent blue. The drones aligned in perfect formation. The weapon had a pilot. The silence in the archive spire was broken by the sound of a boot hitting metal. General Reyes stepped forward. She was limping, bleeding, and exhausted. But she moved with the terrifying momentum of history. She walked past Mason, who was kneeling on the floor, staring at his empty hands. She walked past the stunned guards. She walked up to the central console, which was still miraculously functional. The truth mirrors were still active. The entire council was watching. Reyes looked into the camera. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a judge. "Bring him here," Reyes commanded. Sloan and Volkov dragged the high speaker from his hiding spot behind a collapsed statue. They threw him onto the central dais. Xylos scrambled to his knees, looking at the camera, then at the massive blue ship hovering outside the window. "You cannot do this," Xylos sputtered. "I am the High Speaker. I am the voice of the Council." "We are checking the audio on that," Reyes said coldly. She hit a button on the console. Emergency session initiated. The room hummed. The floor lit up with the seal of the Grand Tribunal. This was no longer a crime scene, it was a court. "We are under session," Reyes announced. Her voice amplified to every corner of the ring. "The charge is treason. The charge is conspiracy to incite war. The charge is the torture of prisoners of war." "I deny it," Xylos shouted. "These humans are lying. They used mind control technology." The truth mirrors activated. Above the High Speaker, a massive holographic projection appeared. It showed his nervous system. It showed the electrical impulses of his brain. As he spoke the lie, the projection turned a violent, sickly green. The pain receptors in his brain lit up, the tribunal's own technology punishing the deception. Xylos screamed as the feedback loop hit him, collapsing to the floor. "The mirror says you are lying," Sloane observed dryly, leaning on her shock lance. Volkov stepped forward. She held up a data pad. "And here is the money," she said, broadcasting the file to the stream. "The payments to the Earth extremists, the payments to the pirate fleets. It is all here." On the screen, the other delegates of the council, watching from their safe bunkers and private yachts, saw the undeniable truth. They saw the money trail. They saw their leader writhing in the grip of his own justice system. The political tide didn't just turn, it evaporated. "Security!" A voice crackled over the guard channel. It was the captain of the guard. "Arrest the high speaker." The guards in the room looked at Xylos. Then they looked at Reyes. They holstered their weapons. Two of them stepped forward, grabbed Xylos by his ruined robes, and hauled him to his feet. "Get your hands off me!" Xylos shrieked. "I did this for you. I did this to keep us safe from the monsters." Reyes stepped into his face. She was a foot shorter than him, but she loomed like a giant. "We aren't the monsters, Xylos," she said quietly. "We're just the ones who clean up the mess." They dragged him away. Outside, the Baba Yaga began to move. It did not fire. It did not attack the fleet. It slowly rotated, turning its back on the tribunal ring. Inside the cockpit of the USS Punchline, Bax and Kestrel watched the sensor readings. "The energy signature has changed," Kestrel whispered. "It is stable. The chaotic waveforms are gone. It is singing a harmony." Mason stood on the ruined observation deck of the Spire, watching the ship. He felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything but a dull, aching grief. He watched the blue Leviathan accelerate. It didn't warp. It simply slipped sideways into the dark, fading from view like a dream upon waking. It took the ghost of the war with it. It took the anger, and it took the woman he loved. A message blinked on his wrist display. Text only. "Live. That is the harder revenge." Mason stared at the words until they blurred. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, smearing soot and tears. He didn't reply. There was no one to reply to. 6 months later, the Grand Plaza of the Terran Coalition in Geneva was packed. A sea of faces, human and alien, stretched from the podium to the lakefront. Banners snapped in the crisp autumn wind. General Amina Reyes stood at the microphone. Her arm was in a sling, and she walked with a cane, but her voice was as strong as ever. "They wanted us to hate," Reyes told the crowd. "They tortured us to make us into symbols of war. They wanted us to come back here and demand blood." She looked out at the silent thousands. "But we refused, because the cost of vengeance is too high. We have seen what happens when pain becomes policy. We have seen the monsters we can become." Beside her, General Sloane and General Volkov stood at attention. They wore their dress uniforms, but they hadn't covered their scars. They wore them like medals. "We do not ask for war," Reyes concluded. "We ask for vigilance. We ask you to look at the truth, even when it is ugly. Especially when it is ugly." The crowd erupted in applause. It wasn't the frenzied roar of a mob. It was the steady, rolling thunder of respect. In the back of the crowd, far away from the VIP section, Mason Cade stood in the shadow of a chestnut tree. He wore a civilian jacket. He had declined the invite to the stage. He had declined the Medal of Valor. He had declined the promotion to Admiral. He watched the generals. He saw the new peace treaty being signed on the monitors, a treaty based on transparency, enforced by the mutual fear of the truth mirrors. A man in a sharp suit approached him. It was an intelligence recruiter. "Captain Cade," the man said. "Or is it Mr. Cade now?" "Just Cade," Mason said, not looking away from the stage. "We have a position for you," the man said. "Director of Internal Analysis. We need someone to watch the watchman. Someone who knows how to spot a lie before it becomes a war." Mason turned to look at him. His eyes were older than they had been 6 months ago. They were the eyes of a man who had seen the bottom of the well. "I'm not a director," Mason said. "Then what are you?" "I'm the janitor," Mason said. "I clean up the mess." He took the file the man offered, tucked it under his arm, and walked away. He would do the job. He would watch the shadows, and he would make sure the propaganda didn't regrow, but he wouldn't do it for the medals. He walked to the edge of the lake. The water was gray and choppy. He pulled a small device from his pocket. It was a modified comms unit, built by Kestrel, tuned to a frequency that shouldn't exist. He had been listening to the static for 6 months. Nothing. Just the cold hiss of the universe. He looked at the device. He thought about throwing it into the water. He thought about letting go. "Live," she had said. He sat down on a bench. He turned the device on. Hiss. Crackle. He closed his eyes, listening to the empty dark. Hum. Mason froze. It was faint, buried under layers of cosmic radiation and background noise. But it was there. A cadence. A rhythm. Hum. Da. Da. Hum. It wasn't a code. It wasn't a message. It was a heartbeat. It was the specific rhythmic pulse of a song being hummed by someone who was waiting. Mason stared at the device. The signal was impossible. The Baba Yaga was gone, lost in deep space, beyond the range of any receiver. But the signal was there. She was out there, somewhere in the shadow. She was alive. Mason Cade looked at the gray water, and for the first time in 6 months, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't certainty. It was just a signal in the noise. But for a man who had lived in the dark, a signal was enough. He smiled. "I hear you," he whispered to the wind. He put the device back in his pocket, stood up, and walked back toward the city. The work was waiting. And one day, if he did the work well enough, maybe, just maybe, he would find his way back to the music.